Genshin Impact's Nicole Reeyn is built from Orthodox Christian terminology, Kenosis, theosis, uncreated light. But her world is not Orthodox. Her god is a tyrant, and her story implies that rebellion against that tyrant is not sin, but rather righteousness. So how does she use the fundamental action of Jesus Christ's humility, kenosis, to fall from the ideal of theosis and rebel against her god? To understand Nicole's actions, we must start from some context that makes her actions make sense. The inciting incident that led to her fall, the destruction of Hyperborea. Hyperborea was an ancient human civilization. With the angel's guidance, it developed advanced technology and began to question Phanes' authority under the rule of the first angel, Koitar. Eventually they rebelled, seeking knowledge Phanes had forbidden, perhaps even trying to pierce the false sky itself. But this was considered to be sacrilegious, blasphemous by the deity, and when Hyperborea decided to begin actively gathering their forces to directly attack the heavenly principles, they were condemned to total destruction. They attacked Celestia. Phanes' response was to cast a celestial nail on the city, vaporizing it and killing the vast majority of its people as punishment for the rebellion. The text does not ask us to adjudicate this question. However, the angel's interpretation was that it was unjust, evil, perhaps because an angel was the one who incited the rebellion in the first place, or perhaps because Phanes' actions did not line up with the angel's perceived moral order. The text is not sympathetic towards the heavenly principles, labeling them as the tyrant. The specific term boguan is used, which has some strong implications in Chinese political philosophy. It was used to describe what historiographers considered the worst of the worst emperors, those that had lost the mandate of heaven, the right to rule. In essence, the narrative is implying that the heavenly principles has lost the right to rulership because of their violent and cruel behavior and must be overthrown. Taking the side of the angels, from whose side the story is written, we see that the angels have a moral justification to rebel against their creator. And ultimately, the angels choose to defy the heavenly principles. They had seen the winged ones in the sky sing freely and pour out their true loves and hates without restraint. Fleeting dream as it was, how could one pretend that such blazing passion does not exist after that? How could one go back to singing hymns for the tyrant above and willingly take the yoke upon their neck again? They choose to end their complicity in the heavenly principles' actions, and as such, they are judged by Phanes themselves. As part of a collective of the angelic beings, Nicole herself is implicated in the angelic rebellion. But what happens to the angels is quite interesting in its parallels with the biblical narrative of the fall of man, and how she acts differently. The narrative of Genesis 3 follows a specific arc. Adam and Eve begin in a prelapsarian state, a state of human perfection before the fall in paradise. But they rebel against God's command to not eat from the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And as a result of that rebellion, they are judged, cast out of paradise, of Eden, into the fallen human condition. In Christian theology, their defiance against God, their hubris, in believing they know better than him, is what causes the fall of human nature, the corruption of the goodness and glory of humanity. This is very similar to how the angels move. They too begin in a prelapsarian state of angelic perfection before Hyperborea's destruction. But Koitar's act of inciting Hyperborea's rebellion is the beginning of the angelic defiance. When Hyperborea is destroyed and the angels continue to resist Phanes, they too are judged. And their punishment is not as simple as burning in some hell or just being cast out of Celestia's order. The angels effectively become punished via incarnation. They are stripped of their power, of their wisdom, reduced to physical lowly forms. Some are transformed into mindless beasts, others are merged with the earth, or sink into the sea trying to escape their judgment. It's not pretty, but this is Phanes' punishment, incarnation into the human condition, the curse of flesh and suffering. And arguably, it could be seen as worse than the human condition, not merely reduced in power to matter, but having their wisdom and cognition stripped from them, to a point where many are mindless. Like having all of a suffering with none of a potential to escape it, It's even more hell-like given their previous glory. Nearly all of them are forcibly stripped of their power and reduced from their angelic form. But a few angels escaped the worst of the punishment, and Nicole is one of them. Nicole's fall is interesting because it's radically different from her sisters in that she doesn't wait to be cast out, but rather she steps down on purpose. Her handling of the rebellion's aftermath is unique. Despite having fallen with the rest of the angels, hers is not forced. The narrative uses the term stripped to describe the others. While the other angels refuse to relinquish their powers, Nicole surrenders hers. Compare the way they're described.
有人不願放棄已有的權能，
This describes the angels who refused.
那便被剝去靈知。
They were stripped of their spiritual knowledge. And this is done out of a refusal to relinquish. 不願放棄, unwilling to give up, lacking the will to abandon their power, 權能. The point is this term, 剝去, peel off or stripped. This is an action that's done to them, the forcible removal of that wisdom or spiritual knowledge. But crucially, Nicole's loss of power is framed as a surrender. 交出, handing over, like in the sense of 交出武器, surrendering one's weapons. This has some dramatic implications. In returning her wisdom and knowledge to Phanes, which she describes as already been forged by the heavens into a set of shackles, she's embodying the concept of kenosis in Christian theology, self-emptying. The emptying of your status, power, glory, ability, in service of another.
Okay, so kenosis isn't just giving up. Kenosis is giving up for someone else. Like, you're draining a part of yourself so that you can serve another. Take this can of Rockstar, for example. There's power inside of it, also known as sugar and caffeine and stuff that'll cut my lifespan in half if I drink too much of it. If I crack it and empty it into this glass, I was not expecting it to be that color. If I crack it and I empty it into this glass, then after it's done pouring, the can, it's going to be empty, right? There's nothing inside of us anymore. No longer has like that power inside of it. So why would I do this? Well, maybe someone else needs what's in this glass more than me. And anyways, it means that the can now have another purpose that it might not have been able to have when it was full. Like, I don't know, crushing it to recycle it into something else, or I might turn it into a knife, I don't know. But if I just pour it on the floor, then it's not kenosis anymore. It's just a waste of the $3.63 that this cost me. The point is that this is voluntary self-emptying for the sake of another.
She herself had already witnessed the torment these blind shackles had inflicted upon the innocent. If wisdom required her to turn a blind eye, she would rather leap wordlessly into the mire, dark as it appeared, to pursue the answers the world held for her. Half her power she surrendered unflinchingly, for she did not fear the thought of taking on mortality like countless others. When the heavens withdrew their grace, she traipsed the barren plains alongside the vast exodus of humanity. She saw their blood and their tears and heard their desperate cries and pleas, sights and sounds that had never reached her when she was sitting on that rug in that peaceful courtyard. This is kenotic in its full incarnational meaning. Nicole's surrender is not just negative, of losing her power, but positive of gaining humanity, becoming incarnate in humanity's realm, in the mortal plane with everything that it entails, suffering, pain, and crucially, identity as a human, a descent into the human condition. This is like Christ, not in the, well, I'm just making a fun comparison sense, in the full sense of the implications of her actions. Traditional Orthodox Christian theology has placed a heavy emphasis on the incarnation of Christ, of his giving up of his status as God with the glory and power it entails to become man. Recall Philippians 2 verses 6 to 8. Who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. In being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. The word emptied himself in the original Greek is ekenosin, from the root word keno, to empty or nullify. This is the stem from which the term kenosis is derived, and again, the core idea of the emptying of oneself in service for another. Nicole's kenosis is one that is done ultimately for humanity. But interestingly, this kenosis actually holds a very particular theological position. While Christ's kenosis was out of obedience, out of following the will of the Father and pouring himself out selflessly, Nicole's is not. Phanes is not a good god, and she's acting out of rebellion. So this isn't just a simple Christological parallel. Christ empties himself without ceasing to be united to the Father, but Nicole empties herself while rejecting the authority above her, which is a bit of a problem because we need to accommodate this. In the classical Christian sense of the word kenosis, there is an implicit assumption that the self-emptying still happens to orient the self towards God, towards the higher authority. But Nicole rejects that higher authority. Her kenosis is actually through moving away from Phanes. Orthodox Christianity has a specific word for movement towards God, theosis. Now, theosis is a term that's a bit misunderstood since it's reliant on a lot of unintuitive theological ideas that don't really make sense when you first hear them. The essence-energies distinction, Athanasius' description, even the term deification, and a lot of it comes from implicit assumptions about the nature of God and the nature of humanity. There's a complex formal definition, but I'll illustrate it simply with my favorite drinks.
So let's imagine God's energies as light. In Palamite theology, God has the distinction between his essence, which is unknowable and inaccessible, like the bulb itself, and his energies, which are directly experienceable. A flashlight isn't really the greatest example because it does technically create light, whereas the energies are understood to be uncreated and God himself as experienceable, but you kind of get what I mean. Now, theosis is the concept of union with God through the partaking of his energies. That means you're basically absorbing God's energies and are being transformed by them until you're fully united with them. This glass of totally not Rockstar, it's kind of like that. See how the light's being reflected and refracted through the drink? This is the transformative effect, right? The light is now shining through the drink and it's changing what it looks like. Theosis goes a step further and would say that the drink itself is changing. It's changing. It's being healed, right? But when I try to do the same thing with this Irish dark stout, the light doesn't really get through, right? Maybe it does a little bit. You can kind of see it over here, but you can tell it's not really the same as the energy drink, right? It's being obscured and clouded, and the light just kind of stays put. It's just staying right there. Right? It's not really able to penetrate through the darkness. This is basically resistance to theosis. Full disclosure, by the way, I am 17 and I don't condone underage drinking, even though that's a very culturally orthodox thing for me to do. So I used non-alcoholic beer. I'm gonna have to drink both of these, by the way. Yeah.
Now, theosis, as we've established, is often very connected with kenosis in Christian theology. You empty yourself for others because you're aligned with the good, with God. But as we've established, Nicole isn't aligning herself with Phanes. The key interesting difference here is that Phanes is not straightforwardly good. Phanes held all things captive to its will, switching between benevolence and punishment seemingly at whim. The reading's more complicated in the Chinese as well, with the phrase,
這靈智時而因眷世界，時而責罰世間.
Crucially, the heavenly principles, here described here as 靈智, the divine intelligence, is likely actually acting out of will. 靈智 implies cognition, willed choice, so we begin with this assumption of activity. But Phanes is, at times, 示意, regarding benevolently and blaming and punishing the world, switching between the two, which the English localization implies as at whim. The punishment and judgment is arbitrarily directed at the mortal realm, and not just randomly, but because they have thought about it. The angels understand Phanes as having inflicted torment upon the innocent. So, for moral reasons, Nicole doesn't act canotically out of any kind of love for Phanes, out of any desire to be united to them. She's actively opposed to it. She would rather step down from her power and continue aiding humanity than maintain her power and wisdom and stay aligned with the heavenly principles. This is what the Guinness is meant to represent, the rejection of theosis. I'd actually coin a new term here for ease of use. This is antitheosis, the deliberate movement away from communion with a divinity because communion would not be ethically acceptable. In essence, she apostatizes from the heavenly principles, turns away from and rejects them, and is choosing to act out of disobedience rather than obedience. This is a radical and direct opposite of how theosis and kenosis relate in Orthodoxy. But in a sense, her antitheosis is her method and motivation behind her self-emptying. In rebelling against her god, losing her deified capabilities and power, in gaining humanity, her kenosis takes root. Rather than becoming like Phanes through theosis, she rejects them through antitheosis, leading to her kenosis.
The daughter of the sea offered up her voice to gain legs. The children of the air did the same to gain form, and now the daughter of the heavens sacrificed her voice to become human.
But Nicole's kenosis and self-emptying isn't pure. There's a complication here.
In truth, it's not that I'm any smarter than the other angels. I chose to offer up my voice back then because, well, how does that saying go? Fortune favors the bold? The heavens demanded silence and punishment, so I thought a lifetime of voicelessness could be a good bargaining chip.
The term bargaining chip is specifically used here. Now, I find this interesting because this is a huge set of implications. Gambling, maybe, but also that she has her own personal stake in this issue, that she did it out of calculation. So Nicole's kenosis might not be out of pure purity of heart, so to speak, but because she acted out of pragmatism. Perhaps a true purity of heart would have more overt, more direct rebellion, but it wouldn't likely frame its sacrifice as a bargaining chip. This suggests some uncomfortable questions about Nicole herself, because if we look at it, did she also self-sacrifice to avoid being destroyed like the rest of the angels? I don't think I have a proper definitive answer for that. The secretly selfish reading is rather speculative, and in my opinion, reads a bit too much into what's actually shown in the text. But regardless of whether this worst-case bad faith interpretation is true, we can assume Nicole doesn't have the kenosis of a selfless saint, but of a pragmatic freedom fighter. Her aim is still anti-theotic, kenotic, but her actions to reach that end are not the fully selfless actions of Christ. I think there's an interesting little detail about Nicole's naming that's related to this whole argument. Nicole derives from Nikolaus, composed of Nike, victory, and Laos, people. Together, victory of the people. The word Nika, another declension of the word Nike, is a recurring motif everywhere in Orthodox Christianity as a part of the phrase IC, XC, and IKA. It's stamped basically everywhere. It's one of the most recognizable Orthodox motifs. It's actually a Greek acronym, Jesus Christos Nika, Jesus Christ takes victory. Now, Christ's victory is won over death and corruption in order to redeem humanity, in service of God and of humanity. But Nicole's aim, as her name suggests, the victory of her people, and we've established that she rejects her supreme God. Nicole's righteousness ultimately does not see its origin or goal as obedience to the heavenly principles, but as the servitude to humanity. St. Athanasius wrote extensively on the question of kenosis and theosis in his work on the incarnation of a word. Avtos gar en anthropesen, hina himis theopiephomen. Commonly translated, for he was made man, so that we might be made God. Nicole saw God and decided to become not God, to distance herself from them as much as she could, so she could pursue what she saw as righteousness. Humanity.
Giving up my wings was not a fall from grace, but a chance to become part of something tangible.
Okay, so that was a lot. I think that was the fastest I've ever made a video essay. So to clarify the theology a bit, this isn't about whether or not rebellion against God is ever justified, but what Genshin's text is implying about rebellion against Phanes, who is not actually to be equated with any other real-world deities. I don't want this video to be received as any kind of attack on anyone's religion. Also, in case you didn't know, I myself am an Orthodox Christian, and this is like an analysis of a game from an insider's standpoint. Also, I do realize that my description of Kenosis is ever so slightly oversimplified and can really easily tip over into an actual heresy, so see note 7 for that. I'm going to play the notes on screen that were referenced earlier, and if you don't want to listen to me yap, mute up and read them. Okay, so cool news that you may or may not care about, but I just developed like a new way of like structuring my workflow, so I'm not wasting half my editing writing cycle staring at my screen for like 60% of the time. Unfortunately, school is going to start again soon, so I don't really know what my schedule is going to look like, but I have some other videos soon, probably, hopefully. Nahada and Akamov Part 2 are probably going to be like early-ish September, but beyond that I can't promise as much. I've actually written like most of the rest of this specific series. I'm going to go over the ideas of uncreated light, the monergist versus synergist debate, and eventually existentialism versus teleology, and how all of these relate to Nicole and her character, and those will probably be released over my first semester of the year. I do also want to yap about Arknights at some point because I don't want this to be like a Genshin only LARP fest. Thank you so much for watching this far into the video, by the way. If you're this far in, you're like the specific kind of person that this channel is for, and like, thanks for sticking with me. I do genuinely appreciate it. I really don't know how to write outros, like and subscribe and all that. Also, I do actually read all your comments, so if you want to type an essay about theology or correct me on Genshin lore, or call me a slur if that happens to be the particular genre of commentary that you fancy, I will read it and let you know what I think. Anyways, I am September, and hopefully I will see you next time.